Audi action. Got to replace the starter on this Audi, and this is a S5. And the starter is, well, there's the oil pan. And long time. It is right in there. Right here, Audi S5. No starter took a dump on this car, and manufacturer says you gotta take the whole engine out to get this starter. The starter is buried in this car. Okay, so we have an oil pan. I actually started working on it. I got a couple things out. Got the alternator out. I pulled the front end forward. So you can see, rolled over some front forward. Secondary air pump. Okay, that's out of the way. Took off some grounds from here. Motor mount plug, and then the coolant line up there that goes to the reservoir. The starter is, you can't even see yet, but right here we have the motor mount. So I'm gonna actually jack up the engine, not from the bottom, just from the top. Just have it hold with a cross brace, and take this mount out, and the starter should be back there. This mount out, a couple bolts here, this guy, and there's a bolt that goes straight through for the middle of the mount. It's a big old triple square. I don't know if you can see it, probably not. So it's in there. Let's back up, let's go. There it is, right there. So that comes out. I'm gonna pull that motor mount out and see if I can sneak this starter out without pulling this whole engine out. Day 2, tearing the car apart to get the starter. So I went to AutoZone, and so this is what I bought. I bought the engine mount hoist, whatever you want to call it, and Audi so graciously has these jack points on the motor to hold it up. There you go, two in the front, one on each side, and one in the back. If I have this up, I have the engine up a little bit so I'm going to get to the motor mount, take the motor mount out. So, the motor mount is, let me see, like I showed you last video, it is right there. So these two bolts, one here, and then that triple square that's in the middle, like I said, right there. Right there. You guys see it. So I'm going to take that out. I'm going to pull the bracket off, because there is a bracket right here. This bracket also has two triple squares, which is right down here. They're only on one side, so this bolt actually goes straight through the other side. So I got two of those. These two and these two hold the bracket in, and then the motor mount, motor mount comes out. This is also being held by these two big bolts and that one guy. Alright guys, I am working on getting these two bolts out just for the motor mount, the little cover that's around it. So I actually loosen them up and loosen these guys up, and here's the tool that I use. Just a 1/4 inch ratchet with a 1/4 inch very small bit. These are actually Matco. Very, very, very good tool. It's not that big. It's just a comparison. Here is a regular, medium socket. It's a 19, but look at that. So small they are. Alright, so here's a starter. We're gonna bench test it, see if it's okay. I can tell you right now, it smells like it got fried pretty good. So there's that. You got the cover, just a mount, a bracket that bolts onto the block, and then you got the motor mount, hydraulic, alternator, and you got the cover for the motor mount. There we go. And this is what it looks like. So I dropped the subframe a little bit, as you can see. A little tough to see. There you go. And then the starter's buried in there. I'm gonna take a couple things out just to get to it. So I just got the new starter in, and I thought I misplaced it, but I see it now. The old starter, I took it off. It definitely was burnt out. Here's a new one, some remount. I think it's Duralast or something like that. Yeah, Duralast. And they're gonna put it in. Hopefully, it doesn't take as long to put it in as it did taking it out. So, here's the car. Here she is, still on the ground. It's Tuesday. I'm pretty sure I would have had it done on Sunday if the right starter was in. But it wasn't, and now I gotta deal with it on the weekday. Oh, here's the parts. Don't look like much, but trust me. Some of those bolts to get to, whoo, believe how tough it was. Alright, so this is so far the progress. So it disconnected the line for the cool bottle. I disconnect that. Took the front bumper off. Okay, there's a bolt back here. It just goes. You can take the liner off. There's a bolt just hidden in there. This is in here. Right here. It's just a bolt that goes through the back side. Take that out. Take some of the torque bolts that are right here. Take them off down there. Take some of them off right here. Undo some of the clips on that liner. Disconnect the fog lamps. Okay, both sides. Take the wheel off. I had the wheel on right now because I had it set on the ground. Anyways, take the wheel off. Take the inside liner out on this one. On this side, because it starts on this side. So when you do all that, pull the front end forward, which is four bolts. You can see it. Let's see if I can find it. Right there. Alright, so I have a long bolt that I have. I just have it in there, but there's 1, 2, and then there's another one in there, that pocket right there. In this pocket. There's one in there. And the other one is 1, 2, 3. Alright, so I guess there's just one up top if I remember. Yeah, just one. So take them out, pull the front end up. I have blocks actually holding the front end. Because if you don't have anything on the front end, this rat support would actually push back. And it's just be a pain. You gotta do that because you gotta take the tensioner out that's down here. That bolt's down here. You gotta take the tensioner out. Don't worry about the tensioner until you get this move forward. Because if you worry about tensioner and take it out early, it's not gonna matter because you'll never get the bolts out from the tensioner. So in order to take tensioner out, you gotta pull the rat support forward. Take the belt off. Alright, so this is what I have removed so far. So I have the cover for the motor mount itself. This is a bracket that bolts to the engine block, and that's the alternator. First thing that comes off is the tensioner. So here's what the tensioner looks like. That way you know where the bolts are. You know what to take off. So here's what it looks like. You don't touch this bolt that holds the spring. It's just right here, right at the end. Just touch it right at the end of the spring, and then this bolt right here. The only two bolts you remove for the tensioner. The tensioner comes out so easy. Look at that. So there's a locating. Just a area where this just goes into the front cover. Alright? So that's where you take the bolts out. I'm going to show you this part as well so you know where the bolts are. So this is the mount for the block. It's going to actually be positioned like this on the engine block. Let me see if I can lower this. Alright, so these are triple square bolts. Okay. This one's going to be very tough to get to right here, and so is this one. Now the way I did is I have a very small triple square Matco set with a 1/4 inch extension. You got to use small extension because it's going to be a tight spot. And those two, you have to be careful not to round it off, because if you round it off, very, very, very hard to take them off then, because you can barely get to them. So be careful when you're removing those. Like I said, if you strip them, you're not getting the starter out, because the starter actually runs underneath here. When it's bolted to the block, it runs underneath, and I'll show you when it's together. I might even show you just step by step of me putting it together. So just be careful with that. Now, so the second step after removing the tensioner, remove the alternator. Okay, you remove this bracket. This is just a cover for their motor mount. I'm just gonna call it a cover just to keep it simple. It's just a cover for the motor mount. Okay, and then you take the motor mount out after that, and then you take this bracket out to expose the starter. In order to take this mount out, you need an engine. You can jack the engine from underneath, but be careful, or have an engine hoist up top that you can pull up, and I'll show you what that looks like. I bought the engine hoist from AutoZone for 112 bucks. I mean, if you're doing it on the ground, you can use a jack. I just did that because I have a lift. So I have an engine hoist, and you will need to jack the engine up far enough to maneuver this guy out. Okay. So I have the engine up right now. I took the mount out, so you can see this is what it looks like. I took the starter out. But if you look at these spots right here, let me see if I can show you. Alright, so let me see. Alright, so there it is. So if you see the bolt holes right there, alright, so this bolt hole, that is where the bracket mounts to. That's one. Here's the other one. Now when the bracket's in there, you'll notice that there's this coolant line right here. This coolant line will be in the way. You have to remember, this bracket's an angle, the bolt literally goes in there. So what I did was, I loosened up, there's a bolt hiding back here. It's a, what kind of bolt is it? It's a, let me see. I'll show you what the bolt is. Bracket. Alright, so here's the bolt to that. It's just a triple square. Okay? And I'll tell you what size it is right now that I have it out, so you guys can know what size it is. Alright, so it is a 10 triple square. That is the bolt that, well, the socket that you're going to need for that hidden bolt right there. Now, like I said, you have to be careful not to strip these bolts, because if you strip them, it'll be tough, especially that one too. So anyways, you remove that bolt right there. That's up here, okay? And then it actually loosens up the line, okay? Now the line will not come out unless you loosen up the bolt back there, which I did not do. So what I did was, since this line is still in the way, I took a pry bar and I slightly pried it. If I remember, I slightly pried it up so I could get to the bolts. Because if you don't pry it, then this line is still going to be in the way, even with the small movement you have. The small movement you have will help you and give you just enough room to get that bolt out with a 1/4 inch traction. Okay. Now you can see this is where the starter goes, right there where the flywheel's at. Okay. All right. So the starter goes in there. There's a bolt right. There you go. If you see right up here, this bolt comes from the back where the transmission is at, okay? And the bottom one is just a triple square that goes through here. Now, here, well, I'm sorry, not a triple square. It's just a regular, what is it, X bolt? It's not an X bolt. It's like a 5-point bolt goes down here. I'm sorry. The 5-point bolt goes down here. The trans bolt, it's a triple square that goes up here. If I remember, I think it's an 18 millimeter. It's not the same as the ones in the bottom. It's a different size. So let me check real quick. But if you can see, it's not. If you see these guys right here, it is not this size. This is too small to fit on there. Okay. The bolt's still up there. So if I remember, it's an 18. Don't quote me on that, but it's 18 that goes up top. And well, a lot of people, what they do is they remove the exhaust just to get to it. You do not have to remove the exhaust. If you, like I said, these bolts aren't tightened, you have to remember these bolts are aluminum bolts that are going through here. They're not tightened like the Hulk. The Hulk did not tighten these bolts. You will be able to get them loose. The way I got them loose was a 1/4 inch extension with a 1/4 inch wobble with a 18 millimeter socket. You can do a medium depth or a shallow depth. I would say a shallow depth might be easier to get to it, but that's just the way I did. And I'm going to show you which way I went in, because most people will go in, but they'll have issues. So if you see that where I'm lining up, that is a catalytic converter for the passenger side. Okay, see how close it is? That runs right next to that bolt where it goes. See how close it is? There it is, and there is where the bolt would go in. Now, to get to that, you would think, oh man, I got to take the cat out. Okay, there's 3 bolts holding the cat in. Okay, this cat separates from this manifold. You can get the cat out if you want. It's a pain in the butt. Like, I mean, a pain in the butt. You can like swear to yourself you gotta get out. You don't have to get it out. I didn't even get it out, and look, the starter's out. So here's what I did. So there is actually there's a cover right here that goes right here. Here's the cover. So I took that cover off. Okay. Now I look up and I'm like, okay, so there is the catalytic converter up there, right above the axle, the cover. So if you go in this angle after you take the cover off, okay, now it's tight to see, like really tight to see, but as you can see, the cat's right there. The catalytic converter's right there. If you see where that light is on that bolt right here, okay, if you go straight back, that is where your starter bolt would be. Well, there it is. I actually have it loose still. So that bolt goes in, and the way I got that bolt out without taking the exhaust out, like some people do, is like I said, I use a 1/4 inch extension with the wobble with an 18 millimeter. Like I said, I'm trying to remember if it was an 18 millimeter triple square. Actually, I'll tell you right now. So it is. No, it's not a 16. I can tell you. I don't think. I'm pretty sure it's not a 16. But anyways, 18, 16. It's one of them two. No, it's an 8. Okay, it's an 18. Yep. Like I said, it was an 18 triple square. This is a setup that I used to get it out. So this is an adapter for the 3/8 socket. I mean, it'd be beneficial if you had the 1/4 inch socket, but this is what I had. I can't even find my other stuff, so I just finished moving in here. But anyways, that is a setup this is a setup that I use. Okay, triple square. Okay, 1/4 inch, and then the ratchet. Obviously, it's a small little ratchet that I use. I'm sorry, it's a mess, but it's literally Tuesday, and I only just got the starter in. But anyways, 1/4 inch ratchet to get that out. I will take a video of the setup. Every time I put it in, I will take a video and I'll show you guys. Okay? So that's it for now, and I'll update it soon. Alright guys, I'm back. So I put the starter in, okay? As you can see, there's the bolt that goes down there. Okay, so there's the bolt. I did not tighten it up, and the reason being is that there's a little bit of play on the starter. We can actually shift side to side like that, and it'll be very, very tough to get the bolt for the trans straight through the starter. The starter is threaded, so the bolt does thread into it. So just make sure you keep that loose, because if you tighten it up, you're gonna have issues trying to thread that bolt in. So I did not tighten the bolt on the bottom. I didn't tighten the bolt up top on the starter, but this is my setup. As you can see, I have the socket there. Well, the extension, if you see the back of the socket, that is on the starter bolt. As you can see, it's right there. There's a swivel right in the middle, comes down. You put an extension on here, electric ratchet, drive it in. Preferably, you should really just start it with your fingers. Sometimes you can't get the bolt to start with your fingers, so just be careful. They are aluminum bolts, so they will break on you. They just recommend you replace them, but we're not going to replace it on this time. I mean, it's one bolt for the trans, okay? Now, I found a neat tip. When you first take the starter out, you take that top bolt out and you manage to get it out, don't take it out all the way, because it is tough to get up there with your fingers, as you can see. I mean, there's barely any room from the cat to the trans. So just a tip, just leave the bolt in there when you loosen up the starter. The starter, just pull the starter out as long as the bolt is all the way backed out. Pull the starter out, leave the bolt in there, and then put the new starter in, and leave that bolt in that hole. And it's just going to be a lot easier for you instead of you taking the bolt out completely and then messing with it, trying to get back in the hole until, you know, it's just a waste of time. So, well, there's the setup that I have, and there's the socket. Alright guys, so we got the starter in. I tightened up the bolts, top and bottom bolts. See, if you can see that, the bottom bolt, and then the other side, the other side of the starter, I tightened up nice and snug. Don't keep it loose. And you gotta remember, this starter creates a little bit of torque. You will destroy it if you don't tighten it up. So, and what I like to do, I like to grab the starter, make sure it doesn't move at all. So there we go. Now we have the power line that goes up here. We have the signal line, and we have to connect that. Now that's a big wiring harness, and I'll show you how it's set up. I mean, it was together. I wish I would have taken a video, but I just decided to do this because this is actually one of my best friend's cars, and they took it to dealership. It was going to be about $3,000 fix. And that's because they have to remove the procedure for Audi. As per Audi, you have to remove the engine to remove the starter. Now you're wondering, like, oh, that makes no sense. Just look up the procedure and you know what I mean. And if you're watching this video, then that's probably because you took it to the dealership and they told you the cost of the starter replacement, and you thought it was, you know, a little bit much, which, you know, they're going by the books. They're not, I don't want to say they're ripping you off or anything like that, but they're just going by the books. Okay, there we go. And the wiring, I will show you where all the wiring goes before I put it all together. That way you can look back on this video and you can slowly, and you'll see the routing and the wiring and all that stuff. Okay. Alright, so another small detail which just came up real quick, I'm going to show you. There's a locking tab on the starter. Okay, I'm putting the wiring back in. So here's the signal wire to the starter right here. Okay, this wire right here has a locking tab, a red locking tab. What you need to do is you got to take like a 90-degree pick and get in between the red locking tab right there and pull up. You gotta release the tab. So what I mean about pulling up is, let me see if I can get a good angle for you. It's a tight spot, so bear with me, guys. All right, let's see. So let me show you. So 90 degree, I got U-shape pick. Yeah, that's a pretty long one. Okay, I'm gonna try to. Okay, so I have the phone in a spot so you can see what I'm talking about. So let me get this. So here's the socket. That's the signal wire socket. So without that on the starter, when you try to start the key, there's no signal sent to starter. It won't complete. It won't send a signal to close solenoid, and the solenoid won't transfer the big power to the starter to make it turn over. So if you can see it, if you see the red, okay, there was a latch on there. I accidentally broke it off, but right at the let me see, get to it. It's this right here. So with 90-degree pick, you got to go in between here and pull back. Okay, pull back like that, right in between here. Pull back. Release the secondary latch. This is the secondary latch, I'm gonna call it. Pull back, release it, and then what you gotta do with the 90-degree pick, go in front and go underneath the front end of this. Okay. Once it's on there, you go underneath like that. It pulls the little tab up and then wiggle it out. All right, guys. So I got the starter in. I got that bracket for the engine right there. It's bolted in. There's a bolt right there, bolt on the other side. I don't know if you can see it. You can. I actually got the bolt through this hole right here. You can actually see it. You can stick a very long extension. So There's the other one. Just a triple square for that bracket. Sorry about the light being a little bright. So there's one up here, one up here. See if we can zoom in. Alright, so there's a bolt up here. One on the other side, and one down here. I don't know if you can see it. Yep, right there. Right there. They're all triple squares. And then the wiring harness. It's always a good idea to, before you put this bracket on. I don't know if you can see it. Alright, before you put this bracket on, you'll want to put the switch wire on the starter. You want to put the main power wire on the starter and tighten them up. Don't forget to tighten them up because you cannot get to them when this bracket's right there. Okay, so make sure it's tightened up. Alright, and then here's the wiring. So it's just, there it is. It's just a, there it is. So you got a nut right there. It's a 13mm. This is a ground. So and there's actually a slot on the bracket where there's a stud that goes through, and then that goes on top with this ground wire that goes up to the block. But you're not taking this wire. You're not taking the wire off the block. Alright, so I forgot to mention, guys, also when you're taking the components out, like the motor mount and the bracket and the starter, you have to drop the subframe a little bit. As you can see, the subframe is dropped a little bit. So I loosened this bolt right here in the front, and these two. Don't take them all the way out because you don't want the subframe tweaking bad. So I took them out and I stuffed the motor mount right there. So motor mount's in. These bolts are not, they don't screw into the motor mount, they screw into the cover. So I gotta put the cover on, screw the bolts in, and there's a center bolt that I'll screw in. As you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but it's not lined up yet. So what we gotta do is we gotta drop the engine slowly until the bolt hole on that bracket lines up. So here is what I'm talking about. I don't know if we'll be able to see it underneath. Try. So there is the mount. It's tough to see. All right, let's show a better angle. So there is the motor mount, and then here is the bracket. This bracket is going to slide down into this notch right here, and when it does, as you can see, there's a hole there. That's where the big triple square bolt goes through and bolts onto this. So that's why I said we got to lower the engine down so this can come down. Alright guys, so earlier in the video I showed you the wiring for it. I screwed up a little bit. So this wiring, which right here, which I have bolted into the bracket, this is a power wire to the starter. I'm sorry, to the alternator. So if I were to have the battery connected, that would short out. It would blow a fuse. This is a big power wire, not a ground. I'm sorry about that, but that's what it is. I meant behind the alternator. But anyways, here's the alternator. The alternator has these looks like pins in here, which actually move back and forth when you're trying to put the starter back in, since these fight you. So what I do is I generally just take a socket. As you can see, I just took one of my sockets and then I threaded in the alternator bolt. And when I thread it in, it actually pushes the sleeve back. So this will make it a lot easier for install, and you're not fighting it like crazy. So you can see. Alright, so I got that alternator in. That wire that I thought was a ground is the power. So I realized that right when I picked up the alternator, I had a stud in the back for the big power. So that's a power. It's black. That's power. So we got that. We plugged in the plug. I dropped so I tried to get the alternator in the way it was set up, so it wouldn't fit. And there's a reason why it didn't fit, because when I dropped the subframe, the motor stayed up and it didn't move. So what happened was, since I had the engine jacked up, it actually gave you very little space for the starter to even fit. So I had to bring the engine down so the oil packet would come down and I'm able to shove the starter right in. So as you can see, I have the nut on there. It's not tight yet, but I'll tighten it up, and then I connect the connector up there. So the connector, I thought that was for the motor mount, but as I kept going on, I remembered it's not a motor mount, it's obviously for a connector. The motor mount connector is right here, and then it plugs in. This is your motor mount connector. It's orange. Okay, so you'll notice in the video earlier that I called it backwards. It's incorrect. Just remember that. Hopefully you're watching the whole video. So there's that. All right. So I put the starter in. I keep calling it starter. I put the alternator in. I tightened up the bolts in front of the alternator. There's two. I plugged in the motor mount plug. I plugged in the oil sending unit. Well, not even a sending unit. That's more like an oil level sensor plug. And the airbox plug. There's a plug up there too. So it goes straight down. That's a really long one. I zip tied them in place. That way they're not in the way. They don't move out. So I did that. And next I'm going to do the tensioner. Tensioner is right here, as you can see it. The tensioner does come with a spacer, as you can see. Be careful not to lose a spacer. It's just meant for the alignment purposes, so you don't want your belt shredding because of alignment issue with the pulley. Don't know how much of an issue that would be if you forgot it. It's there for a reason, so I'd suggest you just put it back. So I'm gonna put the tensioner in, put the belt on, push back the front end. Actually, I won't push back the front end yet. I still have to put the main bolt, motor mount bolt, in there, as you can see. I lowered the engine, and I also tightened up the cradle bolts. Make sure you tighten them all up, because if you leave one loose, you're going to hear a clunk when you're driving. You hit a bump, shifting, put in reverse, you'll hear a clunk if you keep them loose. So I'm going to put the mount bolt back, put this little brace back. I'll loosen the brace, and like I said, pull the front end forward, and before I put the wheel liner on, I'm going to make sure it starts and see if it runs. The car came in because it had no start. The old starter smelled like it got fried. So you can bench test it, and then you'll verify that it is a starter. Other than that, let's keep moving on. Alright, so put the sway bar links, well not links, but the sway bar back up. Put the brackets on both sides. They're tight. The mount bolts are tight. Center bolt, I'm going to double check again just to make sure, but I'm almost 100% sure that's tight. The tensioner's on. It's tight. Put the belt on. Alternator's nice and tight. The front end, I just snugged it forward, so that's still loose, but I want to keep it loose just in case if I have other issues. The exhaust, just those vibrations or little bushing up there, that's tight. I had to take that off. Alright, so let's bring it down and see. There's some stuff that's not on it yet. I'm going to put it at the end because I want to make sure that the car actually starts. If I have to take it back apart for any known reason, then I'll do that. Alright, so I put the coolant line back. Alright, make sure nothing's touching, nothing's pinched. Alright, got my prop rod there. Alright, let's put the battery on and see if she starts. Alright, so let me put it in a spot where you can see. starts. I'm going to tighten up the battery first and see if this starts. Everything should be plugged in. Alright, let's see. The truth. Perfect. Alright, just gonna wrap it up and put everything together and ship it.